Doris. I'm here to share with you about market updates. When will the countdown and the coward game stop? 4 months after the Treasury government's debt ceiling hit $31.4 trillion, the Treasury's cash surplus has recently plunged, adding fears that the government's unconventional measures will soon run out. According to a deadline warned by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, the Treasury default has entered the countdown. House Speaker McCarthy, a Republican, said negotiations have again been suspended. International observers believe that the Republican and Democratic parties in the U.S. are still in the final limit poll on the debt ceiling, playing a familiar coward game together. U.S. politicians obsessed with partisanship and political gain may ignore the consequences of the U.S. economy and the global financial system. What fight? The debt ceiling is bound to cut spending. Until the weekend, the Republican and the Democratic teams were still negotiating fiercely. Despite optimism about a deal, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry told the talks on Monday that he had no confidence in the framework of a debt ceiling deal by the end of the weekend. The main sticking point in the talk is that Republicans insist on a federal spending limit for the next decade, limiting overall federal disposable spending to fiscal 2022, while President Joe Biden and the Democratic leaders want to raise the debt ceiling unconditionally. The differences include Republicans' demand for tougher threshold for federal relief and cuts in clean energy incentives, which Democrats strongly opposed, with the withdrawal of the Biden administration. In addition, the White House prefers to raise taxes to cope with high debt. Several Democratic senators have sent a letter to Biden calling to completely unacceptable that Republicans are preparing to kidnap the U.S. economy and force them to agree with their demand to reduce the deficit at the cost of working families. Many lawmakers don't want to be seen as approving more federal borrowing or spending, but are used to attaching irrelevant to bills deemed necessary, making the debt ceiling a major battleground for political battlefields. NPR reported, why partisan interests are all above else. The debt ceiling is the maximum amount set by the Congress for the federal government to meet its payment obligations. This red line means the Treasury has exhausted its authorization and failed to issue more bonds. If the federal government fails to continue borrowing, it will be forced to suspend certain pension payments, federal staff salaries, or to delay interest payments to repay the bonds, constituting a default. Desmond Rayman, an economist at Corporate Research Institute, told Xinhua that a default would have a significant negative impact on the size of the U.S. Treasury bond market and the important role of the U.S. Treasury bonds in the global financial system. Mohamed Alian's chief economic advisor believes the default is likely to plunge the U.S. into recession. Globally, this would also hurt trade, push up interest rates, and boost inflation, with a huge spillover effect on the rest of the world. With the risk over debt default so high, why are Republicans still arguing at the last minute? In the context of deepening political polarization, in order to seek personal vote interest and safeguard party interests, politicians are more incentive to use the debt ceiling as a key issue to blackmail the other side to make concessions on certain issues. Fringe policy and coward game have become a common trick. Greg Chusock, a former Democrat and former Iowa representative, told Xinhua that Congress has no incentive to do the right thing unless it can boost their approval ratings or bring in more campaign money. He also noted that in Congress and state legislatures, he saw a disruptive way of governance, insisting on go away, refusing to negotiate or compromise. He believes that American democracy has been badly damaged. Politicians disagree in partisan interest, but do not care about real solution to the wild growth of American debt at its source. Michael Peterson, CEO of the Peter Peterson Foundation in the U.S., has said that the growing accumulation of the federal government is the result of repeated irresponsible Democrats and Republicans on fiscal policies. Over the past few decades, Washington politicians have repeatedly chosen to cut taxes or push for government spending plans rather than consider America's future. How to fight coward game to the end. The federal government has hit a current $31.4 trillion debt ceiling on January 19th, and the Treasury took unconventional measures to avoid default. And Yellen warned that it would only last until early June. Still, there was no substantive dialogue between the Republican and Democratic parties since February. And it was only on May 1st when Yellen warned the debt default as early as June 1st. Mr. Biden has admitted that the political battles, posturing, and the petty moves will continue for some time during the bipartisan negotiations. On May 16th, Biden met again with the leaders of both parties. Mr. Biden said the talks were productive, but his intention to shorten the schedule of the G7 summit to return to the U.S. early for negotiations suggests that the deadlock remains to be resolved. House Speaker John McCarthy said it was possible to reach a deal over the weekend, but the differences remain wide. BBC reported that the U.S. government is playing a coward game that would be most expensive in history. Mr. Raymond told reporters that it was the breach that made it possible for Mr. Biden and Mr. McCarthy to reach some kind of compromise, even if the deal could be reached at the last minute. Before that, market volatility could increase as market participants fear a default. The coward game around raising the debt ceiling has serious consequences. In 2011, the last-minute debt ceiling standoff between congressional Republicans and the Obama administration triggered a global capital market volatility, causing S&P 500 to downgrade the U.S. sovereign credit rating. In 2013, the two parties stalled debt ceiling talks to cut social welfare and health care program reform, leading a government shutdown for half a month. That's all I have for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and like. See you next episode.